Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all well. So here's another modelled answer. I'm going to still focus on reciprocal teaching. Today's text is this one. So I kind of know the background to this, so I'm going to pretend that I don't and show you how reciprocal teaching works. Well, the publisher is called Vintage, so that already tells me that it's obviously a fairly old novel. The cover, if the cover's anything to go by, we've got obviously a desk, it's wooden, we've got an inkwell, so it's probably something to do with school. And the title, To Sir with Love. So that, my prediction about it being about school, well, the title definitely suggests that. But the title's a little bit odd, To Sir with Love. Now, I happen to know it's nothing to do with like a Lolita, which is a famous novel, which is about a paedophile. It's not in any area of that kind of thing. But it's to do with relationships between a teacher and obviously a teacher making a difference. Right, so hopefully you can see this. So now we've got some interesting information here. The author's E.R. Braithwaite. He was born in 1912 in British Guyana and was educated there and in the United States. He served in the RAF during the Second World War and afterwards studied at the University of Cambridge, where he received a master's degree in physics. I also happen to know, it doesn't say this here, that both his parents went to Oxford. So he's from the Caribbean, but very well educated. Okay. Right. Let's move on to the text itself. I'll do the same as I usually do. I'll read a paragraph and then I'll ask questions, look at language devices, etc., etc. So, To Sir with Love by E.R. Braithwaite, 1959. The crowded red double-decker bus inched its way through the snarl of traffic in Aldgate. It was almost as if it was reluctant to get rid of the overload of noisy, earthy charwomen it had collected on its run through the city. Thick-armed, bovine women, huge-breasted, with heavy bodies irrevocably distorted by frequent childbearing, faces pink and slightly damp from their early labours, the warm May morning, and their own energy. There was a look of indestructibility about them, from the tip of each tinted head in its gaudy headscarf, tightly tied to expose one or two firmly fastened curls, to the solid legs and large feet which seemed rooted into the earth. So now I'm asking questions. It's in London. All right, so we've already got the background knowledge of the fact that he's from Guyana, but it's based in London. The double-decker bus and Aldgate give that game away. It was almost as if it was reluctant to get rid of the overload of noisy, earthy charwoman. Here we've got personification. The double-decker bus is reluctant to get rid of the overload of noisy, earthy charwomen. I would ask questions about earthy. Why is he saying earthy and charwoman? So just so you know, hopefully this will work. A charwoman, as an old-fashioned occupational term, referring to a part-time worker who works cleaning, basically. So now he's on a bus with basically working-class women, which goes back to the title and to the picture. It's a rough old desk with lots of stains, suggesting a rough school maybe. And here we have earthy, of the earth, that kind of, salt of the earth kind of people, as they say. But look at this term, bovine women. Bovine, which I'm sure some of you won't know, effectively means cattle. All right, cattle, bison, African buffalo, water buffalo. Quite an insulting term, really. They're all kind of basically overweight. Carry on. Oh, seemed rooted in the earth. So here we've got this earthy, we've got cattle rooted in the earth. Sort of semantic field, shall we say. Oh, pen's not working. This is work. This is a new term for you. Hopefully, still not working. Semantic field. Okay, and these are, a semantic field is words on a theme. And here we've got earthy, bovine, rooted in the earth. Okay, semantic field. So next paragraph. The women carried large, heavy shopping bags, and in the right mixture of odours which accompanied them, the predominant one hinted at a good haul of fish or fishy things. They reminded me somehow of the peasants in a book by Steinbeck. They were of the city, but they all dressed like peasants. They looked like peasants, and they talked like peasants. Their cows were motor-driven milk floats. Their tools were mop and pail and kneeling pad. Their farms a forest of steel and concrete. In spite of their hair grips and headscarves, they had their own kind of dignity. So here we've got this reference to Steinbeck, who you may have come across. We did it. He was chosen for one of the paper one questions. But here's this link again. We've in the first paragraph you've got earth and bovine and rooted, and here you've got fish, you've got peasants, and hopefully you remembered the term for the repetition at the end of a phrase or sentence. That's right, epistrophe or epiphora. And of course there's also the anaphora here. And he's doing something really interesting here, because here he's now referring back to all these earthy things, and he's saying, well, they look like peasants, but actually he's comparing all the elements of an urban life. Their cows were motor-driven milk floats. Their tools were mop and pail. Their farms a forest of steel and concrete. Okay? Kind of juxtaposition, really, isn't it? They joshed and chivied each other and the conductor in an endless stream. An endless stream of lewdly suggestive remarks and retorts, quite careless of being overheard by me, a Negro, and the only other male on the bus. The conductor, a lively, quick-witted fellow, seemed to know them all well enough to address them on very personal terms, and kept them in a noisy good humour with a stream of quips and pleasantries to which they made a reply in kind. Sex seemed little more than a joke to them, a conversation piece which alternated with their comments on the weather and their vividly detailed discussions on their actual or imagined ailments. A few words here that you might want to clarify. Remember part of reciprocal learning. Joshed means to tease someone. Chivied means to nag or tell someone repeatedly to do something. And lewdly means a crude and offensive in a sexual way. So here he is kind of looking down. This is kind of interesting, because obviously he's made us aware that he is black. Now, Negro is now a term that's gone out of fashion. Well, that's not quite the right word, but it was considered the polite term for black people in the 1950s and 60s. It's now considered an inappropriate term. Okay. So here it's not meaning the same way as it does now. But he's looking down at them. He's saying, oh, they're peasants, right? Even though they've got their own kind of dignity. So he's not completely dismissive of them, but quite a bit. And here he's kind of, you get the feeling that he doesn't quite approve. Look, sex seems a little more than a joke to them. Again, it's kind of stereotyping working class people. Interestingly, in sometimes you could say that, you know, different races are stereotyped. So here he's stereotyping the working class as being of the earth, even though they're in the city and obsessed with sexual things. I sat sandwiched between a window and a very large woman whose great dimpled arms hugged her shopping bag in her lap. She kept up a ribald duet with a crony sitting immediately in front of her. "What have you got for your old man's dinner, Gert?" Just before we go on to the next page, just so you know, ribald means sort of baldy and referring to sexual matters in an amusingly coarse or irreverent way. A duet is normally a song sung between two people. Crony means a friend. It's not letting me choose that word for some reason. Right. Gert's square body remained ponderously immobile, but she turned her head around as far as her massive neck would permit and rejoined, "He'll be likely to get bread and dripping today, he will." If you remember, we came across this term before, bread and dripping, with Harry Leslie Smith's speech at the Labour Party. Dripping is the congealed fat from meat that solidifies at room service, and you use it a bit like butter. You'd spread it on, obviously here on bread or toast. "You can't do much good on bread and dripping, Gert." "Feeding him on steak and chicken won't make no difference on either, Rose. Never mind, he keeps me back warm." All this was said in a tone intentionally loud enough to entertain everyone, and the women showed their appreciation by cackling loudly, rocking their bodies as much as the crowding permitted. Rose turned her head to look fleetingly at me, then leaned forward to whisper rather audibly to Gert, "Wouldn't mind having this lot and me stocking for Christmas, Gert." The chuckle which accompanied this remark shook every ounce of her like an ague. That means a fever. And I could feel it being conducted through the bus to me. Again, Gert was forced to perform the trick of rotating her head against the uncompromisingly thick neck. Her beady eyes slanted backwards to bring me into orbit. She retorted, not so loudly, "Ah, give over, Rose. You wouldn't know what to do with it. You've been a widow too long." "Speak for yourself, Gert," Rose replied gaily. It's like riding a bicycle. You never forget how. You wouldn't credit it, but I figure I could teach him a thing or two. So here we are. So this long section with extra dialogue, plenty of dialogue here. Again, showing the reader the kind of contrast, really, between this seemingly educated black man in an area that is clearly very working class and uncultured. Now, we talked a lot about fiction and non-fiction. This is fiction. It's a novel, but E.R. Braithwaite did work in a school, and he did work at a school in London, and he did work in a rough school in London. So how much of this is actually fiction and how much of it is non-fiction? We may never know, of course. He only died recently. He lived to a ripe old age. I think he was 104 when he died, which is fantastic innings. But you know, I'm not a Braithwaite scholar, so I don't know how much of this is fiction and non-fiction. But it is based on his experiences of working in a rough school in London. Okay. I hope that's been of some help. I've introduced you to a new term, semantic field, which means words on a theme. We've looked at a text using reciprocal teaching, predicting, questioning, and clarifying. I shall see you next week.